Well, good morning and welcome to my YouTube channel. So this morning I've come to quite a special beach which is filled with huge historical significance, but we'll touch on that in a wee while later. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to capture some sunrise shots here. I've got here a wee bit late, but we'll manage to catch, hopefully we'll catch 1 or 2 images of the sunrise. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to wander around the beach and the bay and we'll look for photographic opportunities of real seaside interest. So join me this morning and let's see where this journey takes us. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to move to the end of the bay. I'm actually walking to the lower Largo side of Shell Bay at the moment because I've been here in the past, but I've always been on the Crail side. So I'm going to go around the opposite side here towards the salt marshes. But Shell Bay is actually not far from quite a historic place. So Largo is actually the birthplace of Robinson Crusoe, believe it or not. So who would have thought Robinson Crusoe was born here in Scotland? So there you are, and he was real. So what I'll do is I'll keep walking until I find an area where to stop, and then I'll join you back. I'll join back with you soon. I've walked to Rudden's Point, which is an area of scientific interest. So what I'll do is I'm not far now from the beach, and I came here intentionally because the tide was out, because what I want to try and do is walk on the beach and see if we can get some shots of any waterline and rock pools, look for any patterns in the sand, and you never know, we might get some wider compositions with the horizon over to Edinburgh and Bass Rock. But what I'll do is I'll keep walking. Once I get on the beach, we'll catch back soon. Right, so I've managed to make it to the beach. So if anybody's wondering why it's called Shell Bay, and I'm sure you can guess, if I turn the wee camera around, it's because the beach is littered with all these wee bits of broken shells. So that won't come as a surprise to anybody. So what I'm going to do now is there's a small island out on the firth here that's only reachable on low tide. So I'm going to walk over to that small island and then we'll get on there just before the tide starts to turn, and we'll see if we can get some nice images from there. And as you can see, the sun's getting higher and higher, so that'll really help me later on. There are 1 or 2 local artists and poets that like to come on this island from time to time, sit on it, allow the tide to come in, and then they've got a few hours, well they've got several hours of absolute peace and tranquility until the tide goes back out. Well, that's assuming that the weather's kind to them. So we'll keep walking. There's some nice shots here now because the sun's coming up and it's hitting the sand. So what I might do is stop here and take a couple of shots. Alright, so before I get to the island, what I've spotted is this side of the beach is completely undisturbed, but we've got all the wave shapes. So we've got all these wee little turrets and curves, and it's really, really nice because the sun's coming in from the east and it's hitting these and it's exaggerating the colours and the highlights on them. So what I'll do is I've taken a couple of shots at a heightened elevation here, but what I'm going to do is lower my tripod and then I'll take some lower shots and let's see if we can get some closer shots of the beach. And what I'm trying to do is there's a few rocks here in front of me, and I'm trying to use the rocks as foreground interest because the sun's hitting off the rocks and it's really nice. I'm just underexposing my shot by at least half a stop because I want to make sure I've got the sky. I do have a 0.6 ND grad in and I do have my polarizer in because I'm shooting water and I'm looking for water pockets. So what I'll do now is I'll just zoom in a little bit more, just increase. So I'm taking a shot of the buoy marker on the island. Now at f11 that should all be sharp, but what I'll do is I'll take a shot of the rock just in front of me just to make sure, and then what I'll do is I'll turn the camera over, I'll take some portrait shots, I'll look for a couple of more compositions using some of these other rocks, some of them with the seaweed, and I'll share those images with you. Alright, so we're getting closer and closer to the island, but what I've noticed, there's a nice banking of sand that's been lit by the sun, and I'm hoping I can catch that because it looks really nice, and it sweeps up to the right from left to right up to the buoy on the top of the island. So I'll take a couple more shots round about here. I'll stand up and there's some nice reflections off the shells, so I'm going to try and see if I can get some of those images to see if there's any patterns from it. And anything else I take before I get to the island, I'll share that with you now. Alright, so finally reached the island. Let me just climb up. There we go. So this is the buoy on the island. So what I'll do is I'll turn round. I spotted that tree trunk there because there's lots of debris round about the island here. I'll just turn round so you can see the rest of the bay. So it's actually quite pretty. So what I'll do is I'll just have a wee wander around this island and look for compositions. I quite fancy a composition with that old washed up tree trunk there because it looks pretty well weathered, and it could make quite a nice leading line out to sea, and there's an oil rig out there in the firth as well, so it might make a nice shot towards oil rig. But what I'm doing is I'm just walking to the edge of the island, just closer to the water, and I'm also conscious the tide might be on the turn, so I'm just watching the tide as well. But this is all grassy here. It's frosty this morning, so there's white patches on the grass as well of frost. But I'll keep going and I'll catch up soon. Alright, so I'm behind the island at the moment because I want the sun behind me. And what I'm doing is I found this old tree trunk. So what I've actually noticed is there's quite a fair bit of kind of tree debris all around this wee island. And then as I'm talking to the camera, the other thing I've noticed is a lobster pot sitting over there. That might be quite nice because it's got orange netting on it. So if I work my way around with the sun hitting it, that could be quite a nice shot. And there's also some rocks with a lot of green algae on them behind that camera with the way that the sun's hitting on it. I mean, it's not a perfect image, but it could be quite nice. But what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to take a shot of the island, but what I'm also trying to do is get that tree trunk in the foreground. So I'm shooting at f11, a sixth of a second, ISO 100, and I'm intentionally underexposing my image, even though I'm using filters, because the way that the sun's hitting the tree trunk, it could give me highlights, clippings, and I don't want that. I want to make sure that I've got this 100% exposed. So what I'll do is I'll take a couple of more shots here. I'm going to turn the camera over into portrait mode, and then because the rocks that are immediately in front of me are actually quite nice, and then I've got that old marker here on the island there, so that you can, when the tide's in, it'll be completely surrounded, and then I'm sure that back marker's used for the local boats, no doubt. But yeah, I'll stop rabbiting on, I'll take some portrait shots, and then what I'll do is I'll work my way round back towards the beach, but just looking for compositions, because that lobster pot might be quite nice. I'll look at some of the rock formations, and then I'll work my way back around, because I'm conscious I want to keep the sun behind me, and there's quite a bit of cloud starting to happen on the horizon, so I want to make sure I catch the best of the sun while I can. Right, so as I work my way around the bay, I seen this other piece of driftwood, and it's a big branch, but it's actually quite nice. So what I'll do is I'll take a number of shots here, because the rocks are really green, and when I've taken these images, when I go on the computer, I'll need to be careful because they're very saturated. So I don't want them to look unnatural, but here the greens have come up really bright because the sun's on them, and they do look really saturated. But if they look too saturated on the computer, I'll just pull the greens back a little bit so it doesn't look false or fake. But the compositions I'm going to take here is I'm going to do some portrait shots where I've got the full length of the branch towards the rock. I'll try and minimise how much of the horizon I use, because I really want all the green rocks round about the branch. I'm taking a side on shot here where I've got the branch side on, I've got the layers of all the rocks behind it with all the greenery, and then I've got the oil rig out on the horizon. So that oil rig could make quite a nice image just for a wee bit of interest. It is a wee bit far away, and then over here there's a cluster of rock that's got like a green weed on it, but the way that the sun's hitting it, that green weed stands out quite nice. Well, it does when I'm looking at it. I'm not quite sure how that'll work when I take a photo. So I'll take a photo here, I'll take a number of photos here, I'll share those with you, and then I'll keep walking. Right, so I finally made it around to the lobster pots, because as you've probably seen, I took quite a few photos here because the different compositions are pretty cool and it's really nice. But as I walked over to the lobster pot, it's not just a lobster pot. So what there is there's like a buoy on the end of a rope here that'll obviously float so that the fishermen can see the location of the lobster pot. But what I've noticed is the rope that comes from the lobster pot, and you've got the buoy, the end of the rope with the buoy on it here, actually is quite a nice leading line. So I've got the buoy in the foreground, and then I've got the rope going over the rock, and then that's taking me to the lobster pot. So I'm shooting at f11, I've got a fourth of a second because I'm just keeping it a wee bit dark because I've got some more sun, and it's a kind of low level sun. So it's just lighting up certain areas, and I'm using that hopefully to my advantage so that I can get some kind of light and some kind of shade in these cracks. But that could be quite a nice image. So, and I'm using portrait mode because I want the full length of the image. The other thing it might do is it might make quite a nice square crop. So what I'll do is I'll try a portrait shot. I'll try and crop it as a square. I'll show you and you can decide what one you like. Alright, so I've got a wee bit closer because what I'm doing is I'm using this clumpy rock as a frame to frame the lobster pot, because to be honest, that lobster pot is pretty cool and it's really nice. So what I've done is to blow, so at f11, which I'm shooting at, which is a kind of smaller aperture, will give me some detail in these rocks. But what I want to do is I want to make sure my focus is on the lobster pot. But what I'd like to do is, because I'm low down and I'm shooting through the cracks in the rock, I want to make the rock out of focus. So the way I'm doing that is I'm opening up the aperture and I'm now shooting at f5.6. So f5.6 gives me enough detail for the lobster pot, but it also gives me enough that it blows out the detail in the front of the rocks here, and then that'll allow me to use that as a leading line and make the eye go to the lobster pot. So that could be quite a nice image, and I'll share that with you now. Popped over to the lobster pot just for nosiness to see if there's anything in there. So what I'll do is I'll use the camera and then we'll drop down and you can see if there's anything in there, but there's nothing in there. There's a couple of old pieces of lobster sitting in there, but other than that, that's been an unsuccessful catch. Right, so I'm just going to move round. I'm going to go to the top of the island now and I'll take some shots to the top of the island over the back over the bay.